The clear emphasis of John is that Jesus is bound and questioned by the high priest. You'll see that emphasized here over and over. He refers to the high priest, the high priest, the high priest, the high priest. There's a sense in which it doesn't matter whether it's Annas or Caiaphas. The issue is it was the high priest. And as the high priest, it is the one that is representing the Aaronic or Levitical priesthood of the Old Covenant. Tuck that away. I'm coming back to it in a moment. That's important. But Jesus is questioned illegally. This trial is a mockery. It's a setup. And this comes out very clearly in the way Jesus responds. Jesus is not responding here just because he wants to be smart or wants to cop an attitude. No, he was as a sheep before his shears is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. He was not responding to get himself off the hook. He was holding these high priests to the standard that they ought to be held by, and that's the very law of God that they were transgressing. A trial of this nature was not even supposed to be held at night, for example. It was supposed to be held in the daytime. And a person could not be tried, charged, and put to death in the same day. And that aside, Jesus doesn't even address that. But what He addresses is this: you are calling me to witness against myself. And there's a sense in which Jesus says, I claim the fifth. This is the Fifth Amendment here, by the way, the Miranda right, that you are not bound to testify against yourself. Did you know that's the law of God? A person cannot be charged as guilty without 2 or 3 witnesses, and you are not one of them. The witnesses have to be found outside of you to charge you with guilt. And that's why Jesus says what He says. He says, I spoke openly to the world. I ever taught this. In other words, listen guys, you ought not have any trouble whatsoever finding people who will testify against me if I have said anything that's wrong, or if I have done anything that's wrong. But don't ask me to testify against myself. I'm not going to do that. And when He answered that way, He was smacked across the face. Jesus' honest, reasonable, righteous response, which by the way ought to tell you something. There's nothing wrong with a honest, reasonable, righteous response if you're being charged unjustly or apart from the laws of the land, or the law of God especially, but the laws of the land. There's nothing wrong. You don't have to, whack, whack, just turn the other cheek. That's not what Jesus means when He said earlier in His ministry, just turn the other cheek. He addresses them with their sin. But as Jesus speaks to them in a way that was proper, He was smacked. This was simply the fulfillment of prophecy. Micah chapter 5 verse 1, they shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. That's all that was, a fulfillment of prophecy. How do we know this one was the Christ, the Messiah? This is just another one of those indicators, the fulfillment of prophecy concerning Jesus. In verse 23, Jesus responds, if I've spoken evil, bear witness of the evil, but if well, why smitest thou? It's interesting. This is one of the key words that you find throughout John, and that is a witness. This was a big deal to John in reference to Jesus. Repeatedly, he points out the issue of a witness. He begins the gospel with these words, and John bare witness of Him. And throughout the gospel, he is calling upon witnesses in his writing, witnesses to who Jesus was. And so here at the end, in His trial, he records these words that Jesus said, if I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. Bring your witnesses. And so Jesus insists, if he has done wrong, bring the charges. While the